This was the first project that we were assigned in this class. I had never used a scanner before, and I was nervous about not being able to create something complex. So for this project, I wanted to do something simple, yet something that I thought was unique and interesting. I had many ideas, but my final idea came when it was raining outside, and I thought it would be cool to scan water as there was no way to make it perfect on the scanner. I also bought a flower that was in our kitchen that was starting to die, and I scanned it, as well as the petals that had fallen off arranged around it to further show that it was dying and make my picture more interesting. By combining these with my paint stroke and with the help of the magic wand tool, I was able to add a unique background and make my picture look scratched in the middle. I am proud of my final image, especially for being one of my first projects, because I created a picture that was simple yet interesting to me, and it was something that I was proud of. The next assignment was the hand-colored image. I had never used Photoshop before, and this was a good way to introduce Photoshop and the tools it offers. Through this assignment, I learned everything about Photoshop, from adjusting the size of different tools, being able to create different layers and effects, and to even change the colors and opacity of what I had painted. I feel that overall I successfully colored this image by carefully choosing what I wanted to be colored and by making it look as realistic as I could. The motion blur assignment was my least favorite overall because it was the hardest concept for me to grasp. For my final picture, I took a picture of a bike rider and hoped to get him focused in the background blurry. Although the bike rider was more focused than the background, he is still a little bit blurry, but the overall picture is still pretty good. I used an f-stop of 11 and a shutter speed of 1/50th. I increased the exposure, contrast, and used the burn tool to make the biker stand out more from the sun shining on him. Although the picture should have been taken the opposite way, I think that the sun creates a cool shadow of the bike's wheels. I also took pictures of other cars moving while mine was stopped. I thought it would be cool to capture my car in focus and the others in motion, but they overall did not turn out the way I wanted them. There were cool aspects in the picture, such as the sunset and the streetlights, but I did not end up using any of them for my final image. For my depth of field pictures, I took pictures of things outside around my house. My favorite picture that I took was my shallow depth of field. It was of an orange flower that had the background of different flowers and trees blurred out, which met the goal of what I was trying to accomplish. I used an f-stop of 6.3 and an ISO of 800 to create this image. Then I edited it in Camera Raw to make the orange and yellow of the flower stand out slightly more. Overall, the composition of this image is okay as it follows the rule of thirds, but is not 100% focused. For the deep depth of field image, I did not like the way the flower image turned out, so I decided not to turn that one in for my final image. I decided to take a picture of my softball and glove since I had been using them earlier that day. This image was not too interesting, but it completed the goal of what I was assigned. For the low-key lighting assignment, I took many pictures in hopes to find the one that seemed most interesting, although I wasn't sure what to take pictures of. I first started taking pictures using the timer on my camera and a tripod to make sure that everything was focused. My final picture was of me in my kitchen looking at papers in the dark. I had an f-stop of f5 and an ISO of 3200 and a shutter speed of 1/10 of a second. One of my favorite parts of the picture was how the design of the candle holder contrasted from the plain background as well as the light from the dark. This isn't my best work as the picture doesn't really make sense, but I took what I had and turned it into a better image with the heal tool to get rid of the green dot in the background and also lighten the picture a lot with whites and contrast. One of my most unique and favorite pictures was the picture of my mom in her car with just the dashboard lit up. I was really disappointed when I couldn't use this as my final image because the numbers and letters in the dash weren't in focus. Overall, I really think I understood this assignment after taking more and more pictures. The filter project was one of the most fun projects because I got to turn a boring picture of myself into an interesting image that was not perfect. I learned a lot of new tricks and how to apply filters and effects that I did not know even existed in Photoshop. I first created the squares using the ruler, each in a different layer. I then added a different effect to each one. This project was successful because I learned how to be precise by creating the squares, but I also showed that each square did not have to be perfect by applying a unique and interesting filter. This project was one of the most interesting to me because at first I did not think that there was a way to merge all of the different pictures into one panorama. I later learned that using photo merge that was possible. and all the different ways that you could choose the layout for your image was fun to experiment with. I knew exactly what I wanted to do for these pictures. I wanted them to be outside, and so when I was invited to my friend's farm, I thought that would be the perfect opportunity. We always go to the farm to fish and hang out by the fire, which overlooks all of their land, so I thought that would make the perfect opportunity by capturing the pretty scenery and all of the fun times that we have had. When taking this image, I put my camera on a tripod, which was hard to figure out at first. I took the picture before the sunset and had everyone that was there be in the picture. There is contrast with the live trees and the dying grass in the background. It follows the rule of thirds as the fire pit is not placed in the center of the picture. I'm really proud of this picture and how it turned out, and this is when I finally decided that photography is something fun and not stressful. But most importantly, I decided that I like taking pictures of nature. I took this panorama for fun as I really liked the way that the little bit of the sunset left looked in contrast to the silhouette of the dark trees. I also really liked the way that the reflections looked on the water. At first, I wasn't really sure where to begin with contrast, as it was hard for me to truly tell what contrast was. I kept taking pictures of red and green objects or complementary colors on the color wheel. By taking more and more pictures, I was finally able to realize that contrast was much more of that. I ended up taking pictures outside again for this assignment. Most of the plants were beginning to die, and our garden was covered in brown, dying leaves, but there were occasional leaves that had just fallen off, mixed in with those dead leaves. With this image, I had one main green leaf placed in the top right corner, but there were subtle green weeds that were growing in the picture as well. To finalize this image, I increased the blacks, contrast, and a little bit of vibrance. I personally thought that this picture was successful as it showed contrast in many ways between the dead and alive leaves, the changing between different seasons, and the colors overall. The historical photographer project was the favorite one that we did in class all semester because we got to choose an artist that was interesting and inspirational to us. I chose to research David Munich because of all of his pictures are of nature, which is what I find most interesting to photograph. One main thing I learned from researching him was that the best pictures turn out when they are unexpected, which is how I took my pictures for this assignment. I took the picture while walking around on the trails behind Wilderness Valley and saw this, and I thought it would be a great picture. My picture was inspired by a combination of all of his works. I incorporated his reflections on the water, the detailed background, and the directions of the lights against the rocks. To create my final image, I had to adjust exposure, contrast, and use the dodge tool to emphasize the light direction. This image really represents how far I have come with photography in Photoshop and Camera Raw to create the best picture possible. Overall, digital imaging has given me a lot of knowledge about the camera and confidence in photography, as I have learned so much about taking pictures and editing them to make them the best as possible.